Naomi has decided to proceed with caution. Everybody is on watch for this new Naomi. We're going to talk about that and, of course, so much more. This is Wrestle Extra. Yo. This is Wrestle Extra. I'm your boy, A Dazzle. Always remember my tag team partner. Say his name, he shall appear. The all-seeing, all-knowing professor that is Gerard Bonner. My guy, first of all, just how are you doing? How's life?
You know what? We've made it to the second quarter of the year, and the first quarter was wild. A lot of things happened all over the world and in all of our lives. So it's good to be here. It's good to do what we do, and so I'm glad. I'm glad to be here for sure. How are you?
Yeah, man. I'm good, man. Coming off a very busy weekend, very fun one. Trying to catch up on the wrestling in the last day or two.
It's been a lot.
And it's been a hell of a lot. We kind of potentially have 2 weeks to talk about, but a lot of the stories and things that have been going on kind of all culminate into one in this episode. Let's just get straight into it. Friday Night SmackDown, we saw this interesting, beautifully done promo from Naomi, giving us even more kind of a backstory and history as to why she did what she did, her intentions, this new, attire that she's now got with caution all over her, this new saying, proceed with caution, all of that stuff. The detail in the promo, how she looked, it was very horror type. And I love the detail that as she was talking, she was crying, but it looked like the tears were, at first, they looked fake. They looked like it was makeup. And it looked very, very much like It, the clown. I was like, wow. The detail was phenomenal. And of course, then we saw her attack B-Fab and Mia Yim, who kind of sided with Jade, kind of understood her position, had the same kind of feeling towards Naomi for doing what she did and all that kind of stuff. What was your initial thought when watching this promo at first? And then, of course, then what transpired out in the ring later on?
Let me start by saying this. Last year we were wondering, okay, wow, with Naomi coming back, what is this going to mean? And we've kind of been monitoring for the last year or so, trying to assess, has this been a good move for Naomi coming back from TNA where she was a world champion? Of course, she had the great spot at WrestleMania last year as part of the Big Three, then stepped in to become a tag team champion. But we really kind of sat back and said, what was it all for? Until now. I mean, what we're seeing right now and what we've seen in the last 3 to 4 weeks from Naomi has been not just cinema, but it has been absolutely brilliant. We all thought that this side of her existed, but we had no proof. We just had our mind, hoping that one day, she would get this opportunity. And now she has the opportunity to tap into something that we've never seen from her before. Her entire career, save for a couple of weeks, she has always been the happy-go-lucky, good girl trend, always trying to do what was right by everybody. But what she got to say over these last few weeks are the things that many of us have felt for her. The fact that she's been there for people and they weren't there for her. She paved the way for people and they didn't come back and honor her. She supported Bianca, and when Bianca gets the chance to be on the bright lights, she brings Jade along for the ride, right? Naomi, always overlooked, always super kind. And I mean, the nice people in the world can really relate to that. You know what it's been like to have the friend that you've always been there for, and when they get the shine, they don't reach back for you. Instead, they go for whoever the hot new thing is, who really wasn't there for your good in the first place, right? So now what Naomi gets to do is finally look out for her. And the way that this was presented says to me that there has actually been time and intentionality and money and resources put behind this moment for Naomi. This is not a moment where, hey, she just made a move and it's forgotten about. No, they've even been intentional in how they presented her in the ring. She's not had a singles match since all this stuff has happened. It's been run in here. So it's basically protecting what we're going to see, making it rare so that when we do see it, we'll appreciate it. I love what they did. It was brilliantly done. It's the kind of vignettes that we see reserved for their stars, right? That they want to tell great stories about. Right. You know, this was the kind of work we got to see with the Wyatts, you know, and these kinds of folks. So this was brilliantly done. And then proceed with caution. The promo was delivered perfectly. And to me, the follow-up, which was then coming out and attacking those women who sided against her, perfect timing. We didn't have to wait till next week. We got it that night. I love everything about it.
Right, and that's what's different as well. Usually we'll see vignettes for weeks upon weeks. And then someone eventually comes out, whether they attack someone, whether they make a, you know, have a match, whatever it is. But this we got to see literally straight after the promo. The promo happened, the vignette we saw. Then we saw Jade talking with Nick Aldis, and then coming out and speaking to the girls, BFAB and Mia Yim. Mia Yim went out to face Charlotte Flair, but before that even happened, out comes Naomi. Bang, bang, bang. Then Jade comes out, Naomi runs away. It was exactly what we wanted to see, and how it played out was perfect. We have no official, no official match set just yet. But I'm sure we are expecting Jade versus Naomi at WrestleMania. What is there in between? Because I feel as though with quite a few things that are leading up to Mania, there's been a few kind of like, I don't know whether it's complaints is the right word, but people questioning some of the things, especially with Jey Uso and Gunther, for example. Even as great as the promos have been, the stuff with Cody and John Cena be very similar every week. What can we do here with these two to kind of keep that momentum or to keep the excitement going until we get to Mania in about 2.5 weeks?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the road that they've been on has been great. It's not been too much. It's just been a little of this here, a little of this there. We've moved away from Jade beating up Naomi every week, right? It's now moved to Naomi costing Jade a match. I mean, think about this. Jade lost her return match. That never happens. And she lost it because of Naomi. That is a massive win in and of itself. Naomi gets the upper hand. Here's a few things I think they can do. For one, we still haven't seen the footage of Naomi actually doing this. So I think at some point we've got to see the footage, right? And maybe somewhere in the footage, and I don't know when they do it. I don't know if they do it, right leading up to WrestleMania, or if it's one of those things that distracts Jade during the WrestleMania match where she finds out Naomi's not alone, right? She finds out Naomi's not alone. Naomi rolls her up for the pin, which, by the way, I do think Naomi beats Jade at WrestleMania. I think that has to happen. We'll talk about why perhaps a little bit later. But I think that leads to Naomi beating Jade, and then perhaps them finding out that Naomi indeed wasn't alone. Maybe we find out in all of this. So I'm jumping ahead, but I see this happening on a Saturday night, right? And Jade finds out, boy, Naomi wasn't alone. That in fact, there was the mastermind. Maybe it was Naomi and Bianca. And maybe we find out that Naomi actually didn't do the full push. Maybe it was the Meta Girls who did the full push, right? We find all this out Saturday night as Naomi pins Jade. Jade gets hot and then, of course, comes in, whether it's later that night or Sunday night, and costs Bianca the world title. And we got a thing. We got a whole thing that's happening there. But I definitely think there are still plenty of things that are left undone. And I think the Naomi Jade war goes on past WrestleMania. So they don't have to pull out everything in the next 2 weeks. Give us small little things. We probably could use another promo, but we need something to happen for Naomi to really get the upper hand on Jade. And I don't know, it could be one of those scenarios. I kind of like this idea where Naomi gets a restraining order against Jade until WrestleMania, right? You can't come 100 feet of the ring, and because, Jade is doesn't care about rules, and she's going to do all of that stuff. And, something in there that puts a degree of struggle for Jade, because here's our problem right now. Jade easily could be deemed as the bad guy in all this because Jade has done nothing that feels like a baby face at all. Naomi feels like the heel that we can connect with. And Jade is just like, she's calling herself bees and all kinds of crazy things. So I think they need something to try to make Jade look like the good guy in all this or the good girl in all this. So they've got a few ways that they can go. I think that restraining order would be amazingly hilarious. I think Naomi continuing to poke the bear in multiple ways would be great to figure out what actually makes Jade tick and get into that. I think, and again, they only have 2 weeks, so there's not a ton that they have to do right now. They just don't have to keep recycling the same formula.
Yeah. I find it interesting and intriguing that we are still in this space where it could go either way in terms of heel and face. Who's the good girl? Who's the bad girl? It feels like the obvious is Naomi's the bad girl, but at the same time, she's been done wrong in the same way, as you said earlier, that we agree with, that she has been pushed to one side, that she has been kind of overseen and overlooked and forgotten about and all that kind of stuff. So we side. It's weird to side with the heel.
Yes,
it's very. I always like to put it as James Bond villain-esque. Every time they want to do whatever it is, they justify it in some way, and you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense. You don't agree, but it kind of makes sense. And as you said, with Jade's just going out there, all guns blazing, doesn't care, saying whatever she wants to say. So there's still a way for it for the tables to turn in terms of good and bad. In your mind, you mentioned that you believe that Naomi wins at Mania. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think that's important that happens and it not be Jade Cargill?
I think there's still a lot of story left to be told with this. And part of that is why Jade gets pushed in the first place. So if Jade is really this massive threat, and you look at Jade physically, right? Physically, she looks so dominant. She looks like she could overpower whoever. When she got into the Elimination Chamber, she threw Naomi like a rag doll, took the cage door and slammed it against, like she did all of these things. So something has to be done to showcase Jade's weakness and her humanity so that we can actually feel her as a face. Because we don't necessarily feel sorry for Jade Cargill right now. We got to feel sorry for her. So she has to be somehow done wrong. Couple that with Naomi deserves a singles win at WrestleMania. She deserves that. And I think Jade has still a lengthy career. She may do this a few more years based on her own account. But I don't know that Jade Cargill needs the win against Naomi at WrestleMania as much as Naomi needs the win against Jade at WrestleMania. I think Naomi gets the win to prove why she pushed her, to prove why all of this makes sense. And I think it could lead to Naomi having her own girl group if it's necessary. I think, again, her and the Metas make sense, but we still haven't fully resolved the Naomi-Bianca connection. And with the ways that Bianca is acting right now and the things that Jade has said about her on the socials and the edge that Bianca has right now, Yeah, this thing isn't over with them. We need to tie that bow up really pretty. But I think that's why Naomi ends up getting this win. And again, telling a far more convincing story, because Jade is not convincing as a good guy. She's not. And I don't think that's who she is, which is why it's hard for her to do. So I think what ends up happening is Jade loses at WrestleMania. That sends Jade over the edge, where one way or the other, either Jade decides to be this complete menace who's a good girl somehow, or Jade says, I'm going to fully embrace my dark side because trying to be nice isn't working.
It's interesting how all three, Jade, Naomi, and Bianca, have all kind of found this edge or this darker side, all kind of trying to go it alone. Bianca doesn't want anything to do with what's happening with those two. Of course, Jade has had her own promo that she put on the social saying she's in it for herself. Naomi's done the same thing now. To go from a year ago, it was about the three of them and them, building each other up and all that talk, to where we are now. It opens up the doors, as you said, it opens up the doors to so many possibilities in terms of how this plays out, and whether that be by the time we get to WrestleMania or by the time WrestleMania comes to an end, or it carried on later, it carried on afterwards as well. It's difficult to kind of make sense of it, because for me, when this whole thing first started playing out, straight away I said, okay, Jade's gonna cost Bianca the match, and it's gonna be a triple threat. She's gonna cost her the match and whatnot. But Bianca's had no dialogue, at least on the shows, with Jade, and has obviously been in her own bubble dealing with Io and Rhea. Yeah. But there are still elements of this whole thing where it can still happen. Yeah. It's harder to see how. It's not as clear, should I say. It's not as clear to see how, but it's still possible. Let's talk about this whole thing with Bianca, Rhea, and Io. Yeah. I saw a clip earlier today saying that this whole thing's kind of played out perfectly and it's been done brilliantly with the triple threat and whatnot. I must say, a part of me disagrees up until what happened yesterday on Raw. The only reason why I say the storyline, the purpose of what they're trying to do makes sense. It's kind of made it kind of last a little bit and whatnot. The issue I've had over the last couple of weeks, up until yesterday, is that they've repeated a lot of stuff in terms of pushing Io in her face. Both of them pushing Io in her face 2 weeks in a row. Yeah. Then you've got this whole thing of the dialogue between them has been a bit weird, in the sense where Rhea's asking Bianca questions that she got the answer to, or the answer's obvious. Then the night last week, when Adam Pearce has decided that Bianca's going to be a referee, they were all in the ring for this signing and whatever else, or the week after the signing. And Adam Pearce said there's going to be a match next week between Rhea and Io. Straight after, Bianca comes into the office and says, "What's happening?" Like, Adam Pearce just said it in the ring. Why are you asking? Thankfully, we had what happened yesterday, and it made more sense. It was clean. It was done properly. It was done well. But I don't know it's obvious what's happening in terms of a triple threat, but I don't know how we get there to make it make sense now. Or it could have happened 3 weeks ago. They could have made that match 3 weeks ago. Where do we go from here? I don't know.
It's interesting. We historically, when we've talked about the road to WrestleMania for Bianca Belair, historically we said the road has always been a little weird and wonky, right? Like, it's just like the match always delivers, but the road there, whether it was Sasha or some of the other spaces that she's been in, it's been a little weird. This one has actually made the most sense to me. And here's what's interesting about it. Bianca Belair has always been circling in the top tier of the WWE. Always. She's always going to be around the world title picture. What ends up happening, of course, she has the tag team titles when she gets entered into the Elimination Chamber match. They lose the titles right before the Elimination Chamber. So now in her mind, she feels free to go after the world title. She witnesses this horrible situation with Jade and Naomi right at the top of the Elimination Chamber match. Yet she finds a way to tunnel through, push through. She's earned her world title match. Her spot at WrestleMania is secure. The question is, who is it going to be against? Io or Rhea? Nobody saw Io winning that match because it was a foregone conclusion, Rhea versus Bianca. Io wins the match, plot twist, right? So in all of this, what I think it makes sense is Bianca's world title match has been guaranteed simply on the basis of her winning the Elimination Chamber match. Cool. That's what's supposed to happen. I appreciate the continuity that they've never threatened her world title match. The question is, where does Rhea fit in? It's not really where Bianca fits in. It's where does Rhea fit in? Rhea, having lost the title, is now figuring out where her rematch is. Now, Rhea blaming Bianca is on Rhea, right? And that's how we end up in this triple threat and Io and all the like. So I've been enjoying it. The real question is, how does Rhea end up fitting in there? I'd be upset if they were trying to take the title shot away from Bianca because Bianca's actually earned it. So last night, I think really solidified the fact that we were going to get a triple threat. I think they tried to lead us to think that it wouldn't be a triple threat, that it could possibly be Rhea and Bianca again, which I thought to myself, boy, would that be a horrible way to throw Io out of the picture. Like, that's just wrong. You know what I mean? Because we could have got back to that. But now we get all three in a triple threat, which we're assuming until they officially announce it, which I'm sure they will. So I've liked it. I thought it's been really, really good. And the idea of what's unclear with Bianca and Jade, that I think is great storytelling. You kind of keep this thing over here on this side to distract the people from what's really happening on this side. So then you kind of hit them with it and they go, oh yeah. So we're all caught up with, Naomi and Jade on one end, and people are still forgetting the Bianca connection. Kind of like, last night was the first night somebody actually mentioned The Rock when it came to John Cena. You know what I mean? So it's like these things are hanging out there as small details that are eventually going to get pulled in when the time is right. So I've enjoyed this road for Bianca and this triple threat story. Honestly, it's one of my favorite going into this year's WrestleMania.
I've seen the talk of that match being a main event. We know that the triple threat between Rollins, Punk, and Reigns is going to be the main event of night one, sorry. Do you see this triple threat being the last match of any of the nights? I mean, on night two?
No, I think they've been public about Cody and John Cena closing out night two. So I think it kind of takes away the possibility of a closer. I still think it's a show stealer for sure. And I'd hate to be the match that follows that one, because all three of them are going to go for blood. And I think it's going to be something very, very special. And I think when the night is over, we may ask ourselves, should it have closed the night? But that would be based more so on the match itself versus the lead up and anticipation to it. Which is a whole nother discussion somewhere that they'll have about should the Royal Rumble winners be main eventing. But that's
true. Very true, actually. That is the question, because as we found out about the other triple threat match, people started questioning the whole thing with Jay and Jay and Gunther. Obviously, Jay winning the men's Royal Rumble, Charlotte winning the women's one, and it seems neither of them are going to be closing any of the nights. Is that a bad thing? To me, I'll answer the question myself, actually. To me, I don't think it is. We're in this space now where main events or the biggest matches don't always have to close the show. Or sometimes, as with Punk, Rollins, and Reigns, to me and to many, that's a bigger match than any other match on over the two nights.
Yeah.
So it's about the entirety of the match, not just the stipulation of, you win the Royal Rumble, you main event WrestleMania. Maybe they need to change the wording of it and not necessarily just say main event WrestleMania, but get a championship opportunity and leave it at that, because that's what it's become. That's what it is. If then the lead up to the match and whatnot, as with Cody Rhodes over the last 2 years, it made sense for that to close out because it just was the biggest story. Jay and Gunther, it really isn't. And that's not to take anything away from those guys, but Jay and Gunther against, the triple threat match.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to say that's a bigger match than
Yeah.
triple threat. Nobody's going to say it. I don't care.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to say it. So it makes sense. But it's interesting. It's very interesting. I think main events don't always have to be the closing match. It's just an excitement and anticipation, as you just said as well, like the triple threat with Bianca, Io, and Rhea. Yeah, I think a lot of people are expecting it to be a show stealer.
Oh, for sure.
And I think that's all it needs to be. It just has to be memorable. It doesn't have to be the last match.
What I think wrestling fans have to do is pick a struggle.
Yeah.
Okay. And let me tell you why I say that. Because right after Royal Rumble, they were all mad that Jey Uso won the Royal Rumble.
Right.
And then they were talking about how he couldn't main event WrestleMania. So now if he's not going to main event WrestleMania, the wrestling fans are still mad. Here's where the real win is. The win is getting a spot at WrestleMania. That is the win, because there are an awful lot of wrestlers going to Vegas in 2 weeks that will not be on those WrestleMania cards, both in the WWE and outside of the WWE. Not everybody's going to get to wrestle on the grand stage of WrestleMania. So I think people need to be able to be good with the fact that these wrestlers have worked hard all year long. They have earned their spot into the biggest show of the year. And that in itself is a win. Whether you start the show, you're in the middle of the show, or at the end of the show, you get to perform on the show. That is the real win. I agree with you. They can change the wording to say, the winner of WrestleMania, or the winner of the Royal Rumble gets to, and they have said gets to choose their champion at WrestleMania, but they need to take main event out of it. Because here's the problem. The Royal Rumble did what it was supposed to do, I think, on the men's side specifically, to give opportunity for a brand new star to get crowned at WrestleMania, which is what I think is going to happen for Jey Uso. But if you're talking about main event, the main event, what should close the show, should be your biggest stars and your biggest story. Nobody in their right mind can say that Cody Rhodes versus John Cena is not a bigger story than Jey Uso versus Gunther.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yes, we want to see Jey Uso win the world title, but you're talking Cody Rhodes, who has been the biggest star in the company for the last 3 years, going against John Cena in his final WrestleMania. Hello.
Right.
Like that.
Right.
And then you add John Cena turning heel in that.
Heel. Right.
Come on, guys. So, if we want to operate with a degree of logic, let's do that. And let's just be glad that they didn't take the world title shot away from Jey Uso. We might get mad at the road to all of it, but at the end of the day, we're going to all do the whole yeet thing. It's going to be a great visual in Vegas. Him winning the world title is going to be amazing. Like, all of those things are going to be fantastic. And we know it's going to go down that way. But I think as wrestling fans, we have to just change our perspective and recognize where the win is. The win is getting to perform at WrestleMania. Where you are on the card doesn't really matter.
It's also one of those things. You said that about the win being on the card. For me, the biggest win is coming away from Mania with your match being memorable or your moment being memorable. That's the real win. So if, as we said, we're expecting, the moment with Jay winning the title, or the whole Yeet celebration, or the girls going at it in the triple threat match, and that being a great match, that for me is the win. If you're able to create that moment because they say it all the time. They say it all the time. Michael Cole says it all the time. And we said it about, I think it was Bayley when she won the women's championship at Mania. You know, everybody needs their WrestleMania moment.
Yes.
Not need their WrestleMania main event. It's
Correct.
slightly different. CM Punk's got his own ideas. He needs a main event. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But for the most part, if that's not where you're going to be, if that's not, you know, what you expect to happen, as long as you get the moment, the memorable moment that comes away and people are still talking about it a year, 2, 5, 10 years later, that's the win. That's the win. In the same way we can say, you know, about Bobby Lashley going into and coming out of Mania as a world champion.
Right.
That's solidified in history. That is legacy worthy. All of that. Absolutely. You know what I mean? You know, Drew McIntyre winning the championship in front of a crowd at a Mania. Yes. That's what we were waiting to see. It happened. It lasted for 3 seconds, but you know, it happened.
Right.
But it's still memorable because we talk about it. Even the fact that it was 3 seconds, it's memorable. That is it. I think that's all you need. So it's going to be interesting.
You know,
Kofi as well, of course. It wasn't the main event.
Nope.
It wasn't the main event, but it was the most.
But it was our main event for sure.
Exactly, and it was the most memorable thing from that WrestleMania in anyone's mind, regardless of anything else that happened. So that is what the win actually is, and not necessarily the main event and closing the show. Yes, it's big, but sometimes there's been many matches that have closed the show that we just didn't care about. Right. We just don't care about. We don't want to talk about it. So it's not always the last match of the night or of either night in this day and age. Speaking of triple threats, we talk about the big one at WrestleMania, the eventual one that we're expecting with the ladies. The other one that we are expecting to happen on NXT at Stand and Deliver is Obafemi, Trick Williams, and Javon Evans. Gerard, just talk me through why we expect this to go down and how we've gotten here.
So we're expecting it to go down because it seems like every time there's some sort of confrontation involving lately Obafemi and Trick Williams, in comes Javon Evans, you know, and then the flip side, you know, it started very innocently with Javon Evans trying to warn them like, hey, you know, this group, they're coming. You got to be careful. And, you know, Trick Williams has had this edge. All he sees is the championship. He's really just kind of saying some horrible things to Javon Evans. And it turns into these three going at it week after week. So it definitely looks like the three of them are going to end up in a triple threat match for Stand and Deliver. What I think is so interesting about this is, you know, I said this before, I didn't know what Stand and Deliver would look like, given what they gave us at Roadblock, which felt like Stand and Deliver. So now it's like, how do you follow that? So if you give us this triple threat match, I think the way it ends up being memorable, I'm jumping so far ahead. I hate when people do that, so I apologize. I'm a very big stickler on, so I'm sorry. But the way to make this memorable, as we've been talking about moments, Javon Evans is the new NXT champion at Stand and Deliver. That's how this is memorable.
Wow. Wow. That, okay.
Because it's the thing that nobody sees coming. It's the thing that nobody sees coming. Think about this. Javon has had a number of high-profile matches, a couple of main events connected to the NXT championship that he hasn't won. Why insert him into the title picture right now? It's not necessary. You can have Trick versus Oba the rematch, because their initial match turned into a triple threat anyway, right? Yeah. So it ended up just being the two of them, but then Eddie Thorpe was technically in the match, finally shows up, that type of thing. You don't need a third party to have Oba versus Trick. It makes sense. Your two biggest stars of the year, put them in the match at Stand and Deliver, let them go for it. But Javon Evans represents, honestly, the future of NXT. He's bouncy. He's the guy that nobody sees coming. And at Stand and Deliver, you put him in the triple threat match not to take the fall because Oba's already pinned Trick. You don't need him to take the fall for that.
No.
You need Javon. And think about this. Trick has been saying horrible things about Javon. Trick told Javon, you'll never be NXT champion. So you won't understand it. All of the Easter eggs are there, guys. I'm telling you now. Clip it. They'll come back to this after and they'll say, that guy with the dreads was really crazy. I'm telling you, Devon Evans, NXT champion, Stand and Deliver. That's the picture with Trick and Oba looking crazy. And then Monday night, one, if not both of them, shows up on Raw on Netflix.
Wow. It's not unbelievable. It's not something that I would have thought of, but it's doable. Okay, here's a question I was going to ask beforehand anyway that I kind of had ready before the show regardless. Where do this group Dark State fit in? Because there's been talk that it could be Javon Evans part of the group or leading the group. It could be Trick. For me, if it is anyone of those two, it's Trick because he's the only one that hasn't been attacked by this group. Of course, we've seen it in the past where people have been attacked and it's just, everyone kind of, trying to trick everyone and whatnot. So it's still possible that Javon has some kind of part to play in it as well. And it would kind of make sense in terms of what they've said themselves about creating opportunities and not being overlooked and, all that kind of stuff. It would actually make sense for Javon could make sense for Javon to be a part of it, leading it, whatever it is. Do you believe that any of those two have something to do with this group?
It's interesting. There's a comment floating in there from Jeffrey who says he thinks that Trick is the leader of Dark State. As I think about this, it does create an interesting scenario because with Trick having this edge, Trick, and again, I think this could come out either during the match or at the end of the match. If Trick doesn't win the NXT championship, there are two scenarios that could happen. One, if Trick doesn't win the NXT championship, Trick unleashes Dark State on all of NXT at the end of Stand and Deliver. So where you have Javon holding up the championship and you have the excitement where that should be the go-home shot, they run the credits and then the lights go out.
Ooh.
And here comes Dark State. Dark State comes in to attack Javon. They attack Oba. Trick is standing there, squared up, ready to fight, with Javon on the ground, Oba on the ground. Trick drops his hands. He turns around and then puts the boots to both Oba and Trick. And the go-home shot is Trick Williams and Dark State standing over NXT, holding the NXT title hostage. That's your go-home shot from Stand and Deliver. It makes all the sense in the world.
It definitely does. It definitely does. I think regardless of how it happens or what happens in the match itself, whoever comes out as the winner, that is the go-home shot. So whether that is, as you said, Javon might win, then gets attacked. Or even if Trick wins, they get involved somehow and Trick wins.
Because it's a triple threat match, so they wouldn't get disqualified.
Of course. Exactly. And I think for me, this is why we're having a triple threat as opposed to a simple one-on-one with Oba and Trick.
Correct. Because
Trick and Dark State are going to make a dark statement. That's going to be extremely, extremely interesting. We've also seen a lot going on the women's side of things in NXT. Of course, we saw Jada Parker challenge Stephanie Vaquer for her NXT Women's Championship, interrupted by Jordynne Grace. Oh my God, Jada Parker versus Jordynne Grace. Take my money. Take my money. Just take it.
Take it
just
all.
Take it. I've not got a lot left. But just take it.
Take it all.
Is that a stand and deliver match, or is that a number one contender match to then face Stephanie Vaquer?
I think it's a stand and deliver worthy match. The only thing is, I don't see Jordynne Grace at stand and deliver not fighting for a championship. I mean, she's got to fight for a championship. So that's the tough part. What's even tougher is having Stephanie with both titles right now. So does she pull double duty and stand and deliver? I don't know, but here's the thing. I'd love to see this happen at stand and deliver between those two. But again, I don't know if you do it as a number one contenders match and then make them fight a second time that night. I don't think you want them fighting twice at stand and deliver. No. Either you do that or you have it as a number one contender match with the winner going to fight. Here's what really should happen. The winner should fight for the NXT championship. The loser should fight for the North American championship.
That would be nice. That would make sense for me.
That would make a lot of sense because I don't think you have stand and deliver without a Jada Parker. No. She has earned her space and she earns her space fighting for a championship. So I think, you have that scenario potentially play out. But I love the idea of Jada versus Jordynne at any time. It'd be great at stand and deliver, but honestly, both of them deserve title matches at stand and deliver.
Yeah. I believe it for me, it makes more sense it being a number one contender match. The winner goes on to face Stephanie at stand and deliver for the NXT Women's Championship. What happens then with the Women's North American Championship? That's up in the air. It's up in the smoke. I believe for me, and I don't want it to end too quickly because of the put two championships on her. I think she has to lose at least one by the end of stand and deliver, whether it's the week before or at stand and deliver. She loses at least one of them, but it's extremely possible that she's losing both. And I think Jordynne Grace personally has to not has to, but it looks better for me for Jordynne Grace to leave stand and deliver as the NXT Women's Champion.
That would be very interesting because that means we would have had 1, 2, 3. Technically, that happened. 4 different women hold the NXT championship in the first 3 months of this year. That's wild.
Right.
That's wild.
But
that's all the talent that's there.
Yeah, I was going to say, given the talent that's there, it kind of makes sense. The hot potato thing makes sense given the talent and the level of talent that they have because there are 4 or 5 women who could be NXT Women's Champion.
For sure.
And have a very good case and all the rest of it. I wouldn't be mad if Stephanie loses to Jordynne Grace. I almost feel as though, Jordynne Grace should have come in challenging Julia straight away. You know what I mean? And it's fine that it can wait and it may be a thing for stand and deliver. Fine, better visual, better memory, better legacy, all that good stuff. Makes sense to me. But I think also, as I said, I almost feel as though it kind of has to happen. It would kind of just make sense for Jordynne Grace to do that. And it's a shame because Stephanie Vaquer was as amazing and as brilliant as she is. And again, it could still be a case where we see that kind of play out a little bit longer or their rivalry play out longer and continue after stand and deliver. Absolutely fine. Makes sense. It's cool. But yeah, there's a big part of me that just feels as though the visual has to be Jordynne Grace with the NXT Women's Championship come the end of stand and deliver. But we'll see how that plays out. There's a match that's happening tonight, a title match. Again, it feels so weird sometimes when NXT put on these matches that are like PLE worthy on their normal on their weekly show. Right. Ricky Saints is facing Sean Spears for the NXT North American Championship. Yeah. Again, someone who's just very recently come in, who you kind of feel has to have a championship very quickly, very early on. Does that happen tonight?
It's wild because Spears just won this championship.
Right.
And again, we're kind of in the land of hot potato in NXT championships. You know, it feels like it's a bigger moment for this to happen at Stand and Deliver. I'd rather Ricky Starks leave Stand and Deliver as a champion instead of going in as a champion. I mean, it's 2 weeks at this point. You know?
Right.
So if anything, I think maybe he gets attacked. I think maybe it attacked such that the match doesn't get to happen tonight.
Okay.
You know, that I think is a way to do this, and he gets payback there at Stand and Deliver. Perhaps there's some interference. I don't think it's a clean win one way or the other, but I'd like to see an attack of some sort happen to stop him from actually getting that match tonight, such that he can get it at Stand and Deliver.
I feel as though there has to be something that happens to where it's either, you know, like you said, either the match doesn't happen at all, or it gets thrown out because of an attack, or someone gets disqualified and then they have to run it again and it's at Stand and Deliver. Do you see any kind of potential of other people being involved in the match at Stand and Deliver, as in the participants in a match? Does it become a triple threat, a four-way, or anything more?
Interesting. You know, there's always, you know, much like Mania, there's the fight to see how many people we can get on the Stand and Deliver card. It's tough because you're dealing with a relatively new champion for the North American title. Yeah. And I think, honestly, Shawn Spears deserves a chance to hold that title for a little while. So I don't know. The problem is who else could be in there? Maybe a Wes Lee. Because, you know, Wes Lee couldn't get another shot as long as Obafemi was champion. We've got a couple of different guys who've been champions now. So I don't know if he's interested in that. And I'm trying to think of the NXT roster right now. Who else? I
mean, Tony D'Angelo still has a standing thing.
Yeah, rematch, I guess.
There's that.
I'm still not high on Tony D. I'm sorry. I'm trying.
I know.
I'm trying, you know. So I don't know who else lands this spot in NXT for the men's side, for the North. If we're talking about the women's North American title, whole nother story. But for the men, it's tough because Javon Evans would have fit in there perfectly, but it seems like he's in the NXT title picture. So yeah, I'm just kind of running through in my head who else on the men's side is in NXT that could fit in there, and I'm not sure.
You've also possibly got a Ridge Holland, maybe. Maybe. Yeah. You know.
That's you know, that's why I say let's just let the rest of the culling come in and attack Ricky Saints, because Saints is getting too close to winning this match, and then we get ourselves in a space where you know, now you have a no interference kind of thing, or
kind of stipulation,
some sort of stipulation match for them at Stand and Deliver. That to me makes a bit more sense.
The beautiful thing as well between the two Saints and Spears was their dialogue as well backstage, their little confrontation, very much alluding to their time in AEW and all those kinds of things. I think it was done nicely, subtly, no kind of offense towards AEW either. That's also been a thing that I've noticed over the last couple of days, is people kind of, you know, making a point of that being a thing. In the past, when we've seen it happen in AEW, it always seemed to be someone who just signed to AEW, came from WWE, and they're ripping WWE to shreds, or, you know, trying to make fun of it. As we've seen it very recently in WWE, it's kind of just people alluding to their history, not attacking AEW. Do you see that as the case? Is there a difference? Is it wrong for these these companies to mention the other company? Can it be done in a good way? Can it be done in a bad way?
I think the subtle alluding to it is the wise play. Because you don't want to assume, because this is not our parents' WWE, right? Our parents' WWE, number one, those fans only watched WWE, and they were kind of forced to choose sides. I think there's a clear understanding that wrestling fans these days are wrestling fans. There are very few fans who only watch one company or only one presentation of wrestling. So I think there are ways to allude to it without saying it. And so I think, I mean, because you're right, we've seen it happen a lot, whether it was Ricky Saints mentioning it, or you know, the mention by Sean Spears, or even last night Cody alluding to it. You know, the elephant that you just, and again, when you say it without saying it, you're not giving a whole bunch of credence to them, and it's just a filling spot in history without leaning on their cachet to build what you're doing. Right. And I think if other companies can figure out how to do that, they'd be good. Here's the problem, though. The problem is everybody wants to get a rub off of who they think is number one. So when you mention their name, you're subtly saying, oh, they're number one and I want to rub from them, as opposed to just alluding to it as a part of history, you know? So I think it's a subtle way to be done, and they're doing it, and I like it, because it's still not, that still doesn't become the lead story in it. You know, if we talk about Cena and Cody last night, we're not talking about, oh, the allusion to, you know, alluding to AEW. We're talking about all the other stuff that happened, and we filled in the small blank there. Right. Yeah.
True. Speaking of all the different presentations of wrestling, WWE have just decided to just overload us with so much stuff. And I don't say that in a bad way, but it's a lot of stuff going on. Yes. You know, and I'm talking about LFG and now Evolve as well. Both shows kind of in their 4th and 5th weeks since they started. We're seeing a whole host of wrestlers, developmental, some independents who are part of the WWE ID program on Evolve. How have you taken it all in? Has it been overwhelming? Does it feel like it's too much, or do you feel as though it's necessary that we're getting this type of thing?
I think it's very necessary. And here's one of the reasons it's necessary. There are those who may not remember when there was only one wrestling program on a week, and when it was only on for maybe an hour, you know, so you were struggling to watch wrestling. And if you grew up in the Attitude Era, you were fortunate enough to maybe get 2 wrestling shows, you know, in a given week. But because we love this sport so much, we want to see it all the time, you know, every day if we get the chance. And so now technology has lined up that has allowed us to do it. Now, what's exciting about what the WWE is presenting is there was a time where they had multiple shows in a week, but it was rehashing and repurposing the same content. Right. So it was, you know, you watched what you watched on Raw, then you got a 30-minute version of Raw. Then you got another 45-minute version with a couple of matches that just replayed some of what happened on Raw. What we're getting now is all new content. And we're getting to log in and lock in to a lot of different stories. What LFG is showing us is different than what Evolve is showing us. And it's different than what NXT is showing us. So for me, I think it's great, because what we get to do is we get to watch whoever's being deemed in the hierarchy of Raw and SmackDown. You get to see NXT, but then you get to see the road to NXT, you know? And that is special because it speaks to how many people they have in the PC. It speaks to how many people are connected to this WWE ID situation. And what it does, Evolve really gives the feeling of an independent promotion, which to see an indie promotion with WWE distribution is massive. And you put it on Tubi. Everybody's got Tubi. Tubi's free. So you get to watch Tubi. You get to enjoy it. LFG on A&E tells, again, a great story that we're invested in, of these 16 stars with the 4 coaches. It's a win. It's a massive win. And what it does for us is when you get to see any of these stars on NXT, you get to see them eventually on Raw and SmackDown. You know, it's a win because now you can point back to what they did at LFG, what they did at Evolve. And it allows you as a fan to stay on the journey and be educated, because today's fans love to be educated, and we don't have to go to tape traders and things like that. We can just turn on our TV, our streaming platform, YouTube, Tubi, or wherever, and we can get all our information there.
Yeah, and I think for me, that's the beauty of this whole thing, you know, especially with, you know, when I started this page, it was all about trying to find new wrestlers and obviously specifically, you know, upstart black wrestlers and stuff like that. And I followed the careers of your Carmelo Hayes, Christian Casanova back in the day, who is now gone from doing his things on the indies to getting to NXT and making the name there, and then now on SmackDown. And I love the fact that we're now getting to see these, especially with starting out in LFG, these athletes that are coming from all these different walks of life in terms of sports and, you know, gymnastics and football and track and field and a few other things as well. And we will get to see their rise for the few that will, because you've got to remember, there's 16 people out there.
Yeah.
But let's be very honest, maybe only 3 of them will get all the way to, you know, the main roster.
Right.
So, you know, it's beautiful to be able to see that from the start, literally from the start, with the likes of Holyfield, Evander Holyfield's son, seeing him actually having his first ever singles match.
It's amazing.
And he was brilliant in that match. The amount of praise that he got and all that kind of stuff. To see what's the other guy, the big guy with Booker T,
Jasper Troy.
Yeah. Even the other guy in Booker T's group, the one that's engaged to
Anthony Luke.
Anthony Luke. You know, these guys here, they look like they're going to be stars in the future. And you know, we get to see it from the very beginning, not you know, in the back of FCW, where you probably only get to see it if you lived in Florida.
Right.
You know what I mean? You get to see it on your screens every single week. Follow it. You're excited for the next week. Now there's Evolve, where the beautiful thing about that now is that the ID folks are there. So they're not locked down to WWE.
Correct.
You can still find those guys, your Ice Williams, your Jack Cartwheel, you know, what's his name? Is it Sean Legacy? Something.
Yes, Sean Legacy. Yes,
Sean Legacy.
Yes.
You know, you can see those guys in their, you know, in their relative states doing their thing on the indies as well.
Yeah.
So it gives us a whole different dynamic to taking in wrestling, to following the story, to following careers, all that kind of thing. And it's beautiful to see, man. It's a brilliant thing. It's a brilliant thing.
It's funny you mentioned Sean Legacy there. Again, one of the cool things about all of these connections is we get to connect the dots in a lot of spaces. Sean Legacy is a guy I've worked with, called numbers of matches for him in multiple promotions. And so you get to watch the trajectory. Jackson Drake is another guy that I've worked with. And so it's amazing to watch these people that I've worked with get these opportunities. And so it just kind of shows, like, you never know where everybody's going to land, which again is why you kind of have to pay attention to everything, because you just don't know where you're going to see people.
And you know, it's a beautiful thing. The hard part about it is it makes our job a little harder, because trying to keep up is outrageous.
It is.
This day and it's outrageous trying to keep up with everything and everyone. But again, as you mentioned yourself, you're involved with quite a lot of things. Let's talk about a few of those things now. You know, in terms of the indie scene, there's Arshay Wrestling, and there is All Caribbean Wrestling that we want to talk about specifically. I'm gonna let you take the floor with this one. Just let me know the great things that are happening and some of the things that you want to talk about and highlight with those two promotions.
For sure. Well, we'll start with Arshay Wrestling, which again has just been so creative. I'm honored that both of these promotions have really kind of had the forward thinking to move into episodic television. And so for Arshay, that began in January. And with Arshay Wrestling TV, which you can check out on YouTube at the Arshay Wrestling channel. And what's so cool about that is we've had 11 episodes. The season finale was this past Thursday, and it was amazing. The main event, Darius Carter and Sonny Kiss, just again a great time. And there's plenty more to come still with Ashe Wrestling TV. But season finale happened there, so you can go back and watch that. But what's cool is we're really picking up and with our next big show in Vegas, Mania Week. Which here's the thing. A lot of people have asked about seeing Ashe wrestling, and they haven't been able to travel to Charlotte, North Carolina, and they've just said, "Oh my God, could you bring Ashe to Vegas or to Mania Week or what have you?" And so this is a massive move for Ashe to leave its home base and head to Vegas. But again, shout out to Darius Lockhart. Again, the great way that Ashe has been presented over the last year and a half has made it so where everybody wants to see this. Everybody wants to witness that vibe and that experience in person. So now you get to do that on Thursday, April 17th, 11 a.m. Is where Ashe Vegas will take place. And there's a lot that's happening, including a big 10-man tag match that'll see Team Darius Lockhart take on Team Darius Carter. Of course, Team Darius Carter is captained by the Ashe Wrestling Men's Champion, Darius Carter. Both of the captains of those teams were in the finals of the championship match for Ashe Wrestling, which happened back in December. So there's a lot of craziness going on there. There's still a mystery team member to be named on both sides. So we'll find that out there on April 17th. We also know that there's going to be a massive world title match. The Pan-African World Diaspora Championship will be defended as Shug D is defending against JTG. Kind of a wild moment because JTG also signed with All Caribbean Wrestling. So my worlds get to collide there in Vegas. That's going to be nuts. They've also just announced a 5-man scramble that's being called the Ettore Invitational in honor of Big E. 5 significant big men, which will include AJ Francis and Moses and a few others, going down there as well. So trust me, Ashe Vegas is going to be crazy. And guest commentary will feature the amazing comedian Kev on stage. So, it's wild. Listen, of all the shows that are happening Mania weekend, you want to be there for that. So that's Thursday, April 17th at 11 a.m. You'll want to get your tickets at AsheWrestling.com. Trust me, it's going to be massive. And then here's what you know. All sorts of people are in Vegas. So almost anybody can and likely will show up to Ashe Vegas. You had something you wanted to mention before.
Yeah. Before you go on to All Caribbean, just break down the teams in this 10-man tag, and then also after that, this whole Ettore Invitational. Why that? Go to the team first. I'm just
Yeah, it's pretty wild when you think about it. So let's talk about. That's not announced yet. So we'll wait on that. There's another thing I was going to share. Well, wait, has it been announced? Hold on. I actually think this has been announced. So I'm going to get to that. But let's talk about the Ettore Invitational. This is nuts, guys. Okay, here's who's a part of the Ettore Invitational. It's AJ Francis, Calvin Tankman, O'Shea Edwards, Moses, and Papa Jace. They're all going to be a part of the Ettore Invitational. That's going to be nuts. And again, to honor Big E, it's all sorts of big men slapping me, that whole quote. Hence the Ettore Invitational, which is going to be nuts. Now, there's another match that I did not mention, which has been announced. I'm just confirming it. I wanted to make sure because I didn't want to let the cat out of the bag. And if I am letting the cat out of the bag, I'm sorry, but I think this has been announced. It's a tag team match that was actually supposed to happen last year. Injury prevented it from happening.
Yes, it's been announced.
Going to happen in Vegas.
Yep.
The former NWA World Tag Team Champions, the King Bees, taking on the reunited Fire and Flava. Tasha Steelz and this is crazy. Kiera Hogan. Listen, guys, Ashe Vegas is going to be insane.
Wild, mate. That's wild,
it's
mate.
going to be wild. So that's really kind of kicking off WrestleMania weekend Thursday morning. So I'm not sure what all of your plans are, but we know Thursday evening is Wale Mania. This is kind of the kickoff to that whole day. Shout out to Wale Mania, presented by Netflix. That's something we'll discuss at another time. Crazy.
Outrageous.
But yeah, Ashe Vegas, again, Thursday, April 17th. We're about 2 weeks away from a very stacked card and some surprises. So be on the lookout for that. 11 a.m. Tickets are available at AsheWrestling.com.
I'm excited to see who these fifth members are going to be because...
Oh, I didn't tell you the team members. I apologize.
The teams themselves.
So I had this somewhere. Why don't I have this in front of me? I'm sorry. Let me grab it really quickly.
I've got it.
Okay, go for it.
I've got it. Team Darius Carter. Darius Carter being the Ashe Wrestling men's champion. You've got Darius Carter himself, frontman Joe, Movie Mike, Ashton Starr, and then a fifth mystery spot.
Yeah.
Who fits in that space is I don't know. Then you've got as Darius Carter likes to say, Darius 2. Darius Lockhart as the captain, of course. You've got Yaya, Darian Benson, love that guy. And of course, my hometown guy, man like Darius.
Yes.
121.
Yes.
And then again, of course, another fifth mystery member of the team. So what happens in Vegas isn't necessarily going to stay in Vegas because it's going to be big news because everyone's in Vegas that weekend. So it could be anyone on either of those teams. All Caribbean Wrestling. Tell me about it.
So a lot's happening with All Caribbean Wrestling. I talked earlier about how both of these amazing promotions are involved in episodic television. Of course, at the start of the month of March, All Caribbean Wrestling launched its brand new television show called Saturday Night Vibe, which you can check out every Saturday on Tempo Network, 6 p.m. Eastern. And you can also check it out on the mobile app for All Caribbean, which, by the way, if you haven't downloaded that, it's really quite incredible. So check it out. This past Saturday was a big tag team title match as the New Nation defended the tag titles against the Russell Twins. And what was interesting leading up into this was that General Obazo kind of got ahead of himself, right?
Yep.
And he's just like, I can beat the both of them by myself. And so the board listened, and indeed it was a 2-on-1 match for the tag team titles as General Obazo represented New Nation against the Russell Twins. And by the time the show was over, we had brand new tag team champions. So congratulations to the Russell Twins. They are the brand new All Caribbean Wrestling Tag Team Champions. And they'll be defending this weekend in the Bahamas. In a big show that's going to be happening there involving All Caribbean. And of course, this Saturday, another episode of Saturday Night Vibe happening, which you can check out. And All Caribbean Wrestling will also be in Vegas. They have a show happening Thursday night. My Thursday is going to be very busy, folks.
That's a very busy Thursday, mate.
Thursday night, it's a show called Sin City Burn. And it is connected with FEW. It's going to be a little bit different. It's a show designed 18 and over. And so it'll be happening at like 11 p.m. The card is still to be announced, but it's going to be a big night there for All Caribbean Wrestling. So again, I think obviously we know where people are going for Mania, but there's so many other moments that are happening that weekend in Vegas. And, we talk a lot about the value of supporting what it is that you say you love. These are two promotions that are really working very hard to provide a platform for pro wrestling to underserved communities, right? The African-American community is one that has been growing in the world of pro wrestling, but there still aren't a ton of faces in front of the camera or behind the camera or in other roles in major companies with the same volume that you get to see in spaces like Ashe and All Caribbean Wrestling. So it's not often that you get to see them showcased in these spaces. So wherever from the world you're traveling, put Thursday on your calendar to spend some time with Ashe, to spend some time with All Caribbean, and allow your dollars and your presence to support these promotions who are giving platforms for major stars, a star like a Kevin Knight, who was the very first winner of the very first match in Ashe wrestling history, who's just been signed to AEW. You know, like, you get to see these kinds of stars in spaces like Ashe and in platforms like Ashe and All Caribbean, who are bringing different flavors of pro wrestling to what we know and love. So shout out to both amazing promotions who are giving lots of people great opportunities. April 17th, mark those dates on your calendar for WrestleMania week.
Amazing stuff, man. You mentioned something I completely forgot we've got to talk about. Let's run through some AEW stuff real quick. As you mentioned, Kevin Knight signed to AEW now. Officially, he is All Elite. He had he closed out Collision against Jay White. Very good showing in the match.
Yeah.
What was that? Sorry.
Yeah, he opened up Collision with that.
Opened up Collision. Sorry, my bad.
That's
great match. And then we found out later in the day, later in the evening, that he's officially All Elite. Yeah. As you've mentioned already, you've seen him at Ashe. You know, won the first ever match. You've seen and followed his career from very early on. What do you make of this? Is this where you expected to see Kevin Knight turn up or sign? How do you see it?
It's so interesting. Shout out to him. Kevin Knight is a history maker, whether people realize it or not. The first African-American graduate of the New Japan Dojo, which is massive. Had an opportunity to work with him, of course, at Battle Slam and Ashe. And, you know, he has spent time in New Japan, a former junior heavyweight tag team champion there. He spent time over in TNA, in both promotions, working with Kushida. I think it is amazing to see him on a national platform like AEW. He is so skilled. He is so talented. And I like to see our wrestlers show up in spaces where they get an opportunity to show their craft to the whole world. And so I want to be clear that to some people, there's a hierarchy in this sport. But I think wherever you get an opportunity to showcase your talent and skill, it's a great opportunity. And I think we are needed in all of these platforms. We're needed in New Japan. We're needed in TNA. We're needed in AEW. We're needed in WWE. We're needed on the indies. We're needed everywhere. And so I'm really excited for Kevin Knight to get this opportunity. I really want him to go far and accomplish great things. Certainly a guy who could be a TNT champion, a Continental champion. You know, he's got great opportunities, an international champion, you know, great opportunities ahead of him. So shout out to Kevin Knight. He has worked so hard, very deserving to be signed and to be planted and to get an opportunity to be platformed in AEW.
Most definitely. And there's a few other things you could talk about in AEW, but our time is short. So I'm going to be very wise in choosing the next thing. I mean, we can talk about Mercedes and Athena, but I'm sure we'll get, oh my next word, week. I'm sure we can talk about next week because that's going to continue. The other thing I want to talk about real quick is this whole thing that we've seen kind of play out with Swerve and Booker T. Vlad TV did, or Swerve did an interview with Vlad TV, said a couple of things, said a few things. One thing that stood out for Booker T was Swerve mentioning the treatment of black wrestlers in WWE and made mention of very specific things. Just give us a synopsis just of what was said by Swerve and how Booker T has then reacted on his own podcast, on the Hall of Fame podcast.
Yeah, so specific to Booker T, because Swerve said a lot in that interview. One of the things that he said in there was, you know, Booker T had talked about how he had relatively fair treatment in WWE throughout his career, and Swerve refuted that, citing the time where Vince McMahon on a televised interview used the N-word in front of Booker T. And Booker T was just kind of like, tell me he just didn't say that. But I guess Booker T didn't kind of respond the way that Swerve would think in that scenario. And so kind of alluded to the fact that, you know, Booker wasn't being treated fairly and there wasn't good treatment in WWE. Booker responded on his podcast, the Hall of Fame podcast, and Booker had a lot to say. Booker said that he actually confronted Swerve in Virginia shortly thereafter to express his thoughts and shared some of those thoughts. He said he felt like Swerve got played by even being on Vlad TV, that wasn't the kind of platform that he should be on, that particular host loves to pit Black people against each other. Booker also alluded to the fact that he broke down doors and barriers to allow Swerve to be able to do what Swerve is doing and learning how to navigate those particular spaces. My thought on it is this. Number one, I do love the fact that pro wrestling does mirror what happens in the real world. And when I say the real world, it's not to say that the pro wrestling world isn't the real world, but it is to reflect what's happening politically and socially in our climate. Understanding that there is, and I'm going to say this very carefully, I think there is a generational issue relative to how we navigate certain mainstream spaces. Let me be clear. There are certain things that we can do even in the podcast space amongst what we consider to be Black podcast or content creators that you would not do in certain other mainstream spaces. There needs to be an understanding of how to operate and navigate in those spaces, particularly when you are trying to open doors, not just for yourself, but for those behind you. All right. There are people who would say, "Oh, I wouldn't have took that if I was Rosa Parks. I would have slapped somebody upside the head." No, you wouldn't have.
No,
because Rosa Parks understood I could slap the bus driver upside the head and end up in jail or maybe even dead, as opposed to actually peacefully protesting, walking off the bus, and then leading a year boycott that ultimately ended up causing things to change in Montgomery and in other places.
Right.
I think what we're living in now, the freedom that we have to do what we're doing now, to have so many podcasts, to have so many wrestlers and the like, would make some think that you can just do whatever you want and it would be accepted and okay. Booker T makes a very important point when he says, "Did you think that racism in wrestling died in 1990? It didn't. I think we have to understand that just as racism in society hasn't died, it hasn't died in pro wrestling, which is why companies like Ashe and All Caribbean, and some of the others have to exist, because, look, we can look at what's happening in front of the camera and say, wow, it's a great time for Black wrestling. But what's happening in these non-camera facing roles, okay? In the world of commentary, you can probably only count one, maybe two Black commentators in major promotions right now, right? I'm trying to think of the one in AEW. Oh, wait, no, there's Caprice in Ring of Honor, right?
Right.
And then you don't see Caprice much in AEW, which you should, by the way. You got Booker T in WWE, but that's in NXT. You don't have one on Raw or SmackDown. Okay, let's talk about, you got Alicia Taylor as a ring announcer, and prior to that, you had, Samantha Irvin and things of that nature. But here's the real question: where are we in the executive boards? Where are we in creative spaces? Where are we as producers and as storytellers? We're not just needed in front of the camera. And so you have to learn how to navigate these spaces. We deal with this in corporate America every single day and in every corporate job around the world. You have to learn how to navigate those spaces safely, not just to preserve your job, but to preserve and create spaces for those that are coming after you. And I don't know that Swerve fully understood that. What was Booker T supposed to do when that happened on live television? Was he supposed to stop the production? Was he supposed to quit the job and protest and say, I'm not going to work here because the head of the company just said the N-word on national television? No, he wasn't supposed to do that. You find ways to effectively state your case and create a space so that others can come behind you and others can follow what you're doing. So I think Swerve may not have handled that well, but to Booker's point, I don't know that that was the platform that Swerve should have been on. I think mainstream interviews are important, but you have to look at what the reputation of that particular platform is. And that platform has never been one that has been good to bringing unity among people. And so I get where Booker was coming from. I understand the level of passion on that. And I think, what people, and I'll say this, and I know we got to close, but people don't understand what people of color deal with on a regular basis, even in a space like this. Like, I'm talking to you, and this is Black Wrestling Alliance, and I could pretty much say what I wanted or so. But I know that if I'm going to be paid attention to by WWE, AEW, or any other major company, I have to be careful with what I say. Because they're never going to publicly say that they watch this. But if they're going to search for things on me, they're going to find this. And when they do, what am I saying? That's a pressure that people who are not of our hue don't have to deal with. Our Caucasian counterparts can and have gone on to outlets, said ridiculous things that were completely untrue, said things that, offended multiple communities and still got the job. While I and others like me, somebody like me in your background, we have to be careful with what we say. We have to be our own filter. Nobody because if we aren't our own filter, someone will watch and will never know why we didn't get the call back. We'll never know it. And so that's the thing that people don't understand. And that's how racism is still showing up in our communities today. Because if the playing field were level, I could have a go off moment, stand on a soapbox, be able to say why this, that, and the other wasn't happening, and it would be viewed as truth or an opinion, not as a threat. But instead, I have to carefully say and navigate landmines so I make sure that what I say can't be misinterpreted by people who I may never meet, who will watch and ultimately make those decisions. And I think that is what Booker T is trying to help people understand. You don't become the AEW World Champion without Booker T doing all that he did. Without countless others, Ernie Ladd, the Big Cat, Mark Henry, Ron Simmons, countless other, Jacqueline, Jazz, all of these people who dealt with racism in ways that we will never know. Back when only one African-American wrestler could be part of a territory and couldn't be the world champion because they were threatened by us, or that wouldn't sell to the white counterparts. These are all those. And it's not a knock to Swerve, but I think that people in the wrestling community in general have to take time to sit back and say, before I speak negatively on those people, somebody like Booker T, who has publicly supported Swerve, let me rethink that. Because what would I have had to do in that scenario? Could I have handled the owner of the company, the guy who signs my paychecks, saying the N-word on national television in front of me? What do I do? It's not as easy as people think.
No. And this is the thing. It's all well and good giving an opinion when you're not there. But when you are there, how do you handle it? There's so many times and so many things that we may watch, even just on our socials, on Instagram, on X and whatever else. We see certain things play out on videos and we're like, oh, if I was there, Let that thing happen to you and see what actually happens. Most of the time, you won't even do anything close to what you think you would do. Nowhere close. And then here's the other thing as well with what Booker T was saying. I think, as you said, this day and age, we seem to be too scared to kind of sound like sellouts or sound like, the house Negro or whatever it is. And at the end of the day, in that space where Booker T was it's very different to how it is now. Racism still exists, of course it does, but we feel as though we're in a better place than we were 10, 20 years ago in wrestling, maybe even in life in general, who knows? Yeah. But certainly in wrestling, as you alluded to before, back in the 70s and 60s, one black man per territory and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But imagine if Booker T did go off at Vince in that time, or whenever we faced racism in the locker room or wherever it was. Imagine if he did go off. Mm-hmm. Would we have Booker T in NXT now? No, we wouldn't.
Right.
No, we wouldn't. You know what I mean? If Mark Henry was to go off every time, and yes, Mark Henry has been very clear so many times that no one messed with him and all the rest of it. Thankfully, maybe because of his size, and yes, partly because he was black. But at the same time, it wasn't a thing where his reaction was to go off on people and all the rest of it. He just had a presence that made sure it was a peaceful presence at the same time. But no, and
he had to learn that.
Exactly.
That's the piece that people don't understand. Mark Henry had the ability to destroy everybody with his bare hands.
Right.
But he had to think not just about him, but about the people coming after him. Mm-hmm. And he managed to navigate that. And who knows the conversations he had off camera, but he learned how to gain and garner the respect of the decision makers such that he could have the platform to be able to say, this isn't right, that isn't right, and be heard. And I think that's the important thing that people have to realize.
And then also, even with Mark Henry specifically, there would be no, if Mark Henry wasn't that guy, if he didn't play out, intellectually and learn these things, he wouldn't then be in a place of influence to where we get Bianca Belair, Jade Cargill, and Samantha Irvin.
Absolutely.
All of these things kind of play out and play into everything. So it's very easy to do this whole thing of I would have said this and I would have said that. Yeah. But let's look very closely and very intricately at what happens if they did.
Yeah.
And yes, you're not to me, you're not selling out. You're just having to navigate where you are and adjust to your surroundings. Because at the end of the day, unfortunately, that is what we have to do. But if you don't, the consequences are far worse. You know what I mean? So that is that. We could carry on, but time has far gone.
Yeah. But we didn't do a show last week, so
true. We have 2 weeks to get through. Let's go. But yeah, Gerard, just let us know where the people can find you and all the good spaces.
For sure. You can find me at Bonnerfied across all of the social spaces. Lots of cool things going on. As I mentioned, Ashe Vegas happening April 17th. I will be there. Get your tickets for that. I'll also be there for Sin City Burn with All Caribbean Wrestling and Fighting Evolution Wrestling. So check that out. That night, I'll be hanging around Vegas for a couple of days. So I look to meet you guys there, but we'll get into that later. You can check me out, of course, weekly as part of All Caribbean Wrestling's Saturday Night Vibe. I am your lead commentator there. Every Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern on Tempo Networks, which airs across 24 different Caribbean islands. So definitely check that out. And you can check it out on the mobile app for All Caribbean Wrestling. All of the current episodes are there, so check that out as well. And of course, I'm here every Tuesday doing what we do, and I absolutely love it.
Let's go. Of course, you can find me here as well every single Tuesday on the BWA YouTube channel, live and in a vibe, but also you can find me also as well, and all news and all great things Black Wrestling on Black Wrestling Alliance on Instagram. You might see me tweet every now and again on X, BWA Dazzle. But guys, until next time, thank you everyone that joined us. Thank you to everyone that's going to watch this show. We will see you again next time.